Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Powerplay Podcast. As always, it's me, Jordan Shannon, and I'm joined by Kieran Powell. How are you, Kai?
I've had better days. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. I'm not too bad. I've enjoyed watching the cricket today. Not from a result perspective, but more so, obviously. It's just good to get down and watch it. Really, what was your thoughts in terms of the batting situation? Firstly,
Um, I thought obviously first up we sort of lacked intent. I mean, obviously outside of the way she started in the
yeah,
power play, which is pretty much what I asked for, but obviously it's it's not through any fault of Johnson Charles's. Like he tried, it just
yeah,
wasn't his day
no,
inside the power play. He was trying, but he just wasn't connecting, and then obviously sort of started to make up towards the back end, but then got out at the point where he would have and the West Indies would have liked him to kick
yeah,
on. But I think that when you look at the performances of a Rovman Powell, a Romario Shepherd, and a Jason Holder today, that's what you're asking for of these guys. And it's not that anyone had any big performance, but they all had a significant impact
yeah,
on the game. And that's, I guess, what I was alluding to in our previous podcast is obviously we're going to talk about strike rotation, dot ball percentages, all these things.
yeah,
But if you can maximize your boundary hitting options
yeah,
from earlier on throughout the innings, as I said, I'd much rather the West Indies make 190 and get bowled out in 50 overs going all out as
yeah,
opposed to a big flourish like that, but then you still feel like you're 20, 30 runs short, as I said to you at the halftime break, because you could see that the pitch was a bit too paced. It was more of a pitch that you'd find in the Caribbean, and I think that the guys pretty much adapted to it really well. The guys,
yeah,
especially the lower half of the innings, like they
yeah,
came in and they played really well. They're able to hit some good boundaries, put the bowling attack under pressure,
yeah,
and maximize scoring. But you just needed a bit more of that from earlier on to give a bit more of a competitive total because knowing that our bowling isn't necessarily our strongest point, we need to really maximize on the batting and the power hitting to force teams to go hard from early and try and create opportunities that way.
yeah. I know you briefly mentioned it there about the dot ball percentage there. I think it was at 37%. That needs to be a lot lower. You probably you got to be looking to shave 10% off that really, if not a bit more. How would you, looking into game three in that situation, how would you look to, from an analysis perspective and a tactical perspective, how would you look to reduce that? You're going to get good balls, so I get that, but how would you maneuver those extra singles really?
Well, as I said, in terms of strike rotation, we're talking about traditional strike rotation in terms of singles, twos, rotating the ball in that way.
Yeah.
That's not something that's going to happen right now with this group. So
Right.
that's at the back of my mind. What I would do is instead of looking at having straight rotation come down by 10%,
Yeah.
if I could bring it down by 5% and
Right.
have that 5% be 5% more boundaries, then I'd be
Right.
completely happy with that as opposed to 10% in twos and singles and
Yes.
threes,
Okay.
etc.
Fair play.
That's what I'd be looking to do, just maximizing that extra 5% of my boundary hitting ability
Yeah.
for now, and then look to work on the straight rotation also because that's not if that's not their natural games at
No.
this stage of their careers, it's not going to happen. It's not just going to start happening like that
Yeah.
overnight
Yeah.
at international level. This is something that's going to
Yeah.
take time, and you're going to have to go away and work on that for a period of time before you can implement that into your game.
Yeah. Yeah. No, fair enough. And you're the expert on that, so I do totally understand where you're coming from that perspective. And then obviously from a bowling side of things, was it just a case of they had that mentality of going hard as what we into from the outset, really? Anyway.
Yeah, I think that as I said to you, like I felt like we're 20, 30 runs short.
Yeah, you said
I
that.
think
Yeah.
that if and it's not a situation where any one player on the day got off and completely took the game away from the opposition side.
No.
Just a lot of little contributions along the way. But what I find is that because the grounds are so small and these guys' bats are so good. Everybody backs themselves to
Yeah.
clear pretty much any boundary these days. And everybody backs themselves, no matter how big of an over it is, to
There's-
continue going. We look at
Yeah.
what Jacob Bethel did to Alzari
Yeah.
Joseph and then got out playing a reverse ramp on the last ball of the over.
Yeah.
We talked about that in the previous game. So
Yeah.
that's just the
The way.
mindset of these players these days, is to continue to maximize big overs as opposed to getting through to the next over, not trying to, I guess, see the game to the end, but end the game on their own merits.
Yeah, of course.
So I think knowing that as a bowler, catch 22, it could be it could be in your favor, where obviously you know you're going to have chances, but if the batter gets
Yeah.
off, it could be very detrimental from a
Yeah.
bowling standpoint as well. And I think that it's where a bowler can't necessarily bowl two balls in the same place, the same speed. You know, you've got to have a lot of variations. You've got to be looking to bowl six different balls in and over, and you've got to, I guess, be intentional with your field set a bit more, because if you know you're going to bowl a full and wide Yorker, you've seen pretty much most of those in this series from either side peel off, either
Yeah.
left, right, or over the short third man that's in the circle and go down for four.
Yeah.
So I think that, the things like that are where, the little finer
Fine.
details
Yeah, that's it.
come into play. But from the bowling standpoint, I'm not sure that there's much more that they could have done. I think that, for me, I would have liked to have seen maybe a Gudakesh Moti and an Akeal Hosein bowl at least one over more. I think if Akeal is going to continue to be that restrictive presence in the power play, I'd
Power
let him
play. Yeah.
bowl three overs throughout the power play, because that's his speciality as well.
Yeah.
So you have to back him to finish out the power play for you, even if he goes for a big over. I mean, that's his speciality. And then you get Gudakesh Moti in straight away as well once the field's relaxed, because he showed a lot of maturity. He showed that he was very clever, very thinking bowler
Cool.
today, changing up his pace, his line, following the batter, mixing up his speeds, everything. So he looked very good again today, following on from the first game. And obviously, Akeal was a big addition to the team, but having said that, it still just wasn't enough.
No, no, and I think that the things I wanted to make the point you mentioned there about Akeal Hosein was it's really key, and it follows on the conversation that we had after the first one, the first T20s, that they define that role within that player, so they know. So you are going to be our power play bowler. You're going to be bowling three. If yes, if it's disastrous, we'll have to make change, but that is going to be your skill. You will be opening the bowling in the power play, and you're working towards that. And then, like you said, that a motor will follow you, and it's and that's it. And I think that it's understanding that definition of the role. But again, I think from my perspective, it's still early on in obviously Shea's tenureship as sort of from a captaincy perspective. It's still early days in this whole process, so I don't want it to feel as though they're still piecing it together, understanding obviously the roles within that team, and it sort of follows on from some of the the thoughts that you sent me previous to our conversation tonight. Is the players are not being used in the roles that they're playing for the West Indies, that they play different roles in franchise cricket. And it's trying to work out a way of making sure that everybody is singing from the same hymn sheet, I suppose.
Yeah, I was just going to touch on that. Obviously, I sent that through before we started recording, and
Yeah.
it's clear to see that. I mean, obviously, you look at franchise cricket, a lot of West Indians are used in a particular way, whether it is finishing, power hitting. They generally don't bowl their full quota of overs. So, guys are not, I guess, used to bowling up front in the power play. If they do,
No.
they don't necessarily get a full quota as they would do for the West Indies.
Yeah.
How they're brought back towards the end of the innings. Some guys probably only bowl two overs towards the end of the innings, and that's it for them for a game in a franchise league.
Yeah.
Whereas they're asked to bowl through the middle for the West Indies and then come back at the end. You've got probably three, four guys that are maybe, well, maybe more than three, four. Maybe you got five, six guys that are seen as power hitters and finishers in franchise
Yeah.
leagues. But I asked about three, four, five, six for the West Indies, so it's completely out of position. And then obviously you're playing a lot more franchise T20 leagues than you are playing international T20s for the West Indies.
Yeah.
So you're honing your skills and developing your game towards that aspect of, I guess, what pays your bills. That you're
Yeah.
playing franchise, that's what pays your bills, as opposed to West Indies, which is um, bilateral series and World Cups, which aren't as consistent. So I think it's going to have to be sort of a lot of preparatory camps for the West Indies before they go on tours, so that guys can reacquaint themselves with the positions that they're asked to fulfill from a West Indian standpoint, as opposed to what they do domestically. And that leads me into a CPL, because you look at a CPL, how is it benefiting West Indies cricket? You can see the obvious impact of the IPL on Indian cricket. India
Yeah,
has produced guys that are now bowling faster than they ever had before.
yeah,
They've got a plethora of spin bowling options, whether it be left arm, right arm, off break, leg break, Chinaman,
yeah,
whatever you want to think about. They've got options there. They've got young batters galore. They've probably got 100 young batters that they can pick from
yeah,
to play any position. You know, each position has depth, whether it is openers are probably 10 deep for two opening spots.
yeah, yeah,
Number threes are probably 10, 15 deep, 4, 5, 6, 7
yeah,
wicket keeping options. And this goes across not just T20 one day, but Test cricket as well.
yeah,
So you can see the obvious and immediate impact on Indian cricket from the IPL. What is the impact on West Indies cricket from the CPL? And that's where West Indies need to start, I guess, being more intentional with what happens in the CPL. Obviously, from firstly, the main standpoint is the guys that are in the West Indies T20
yeah.
team have to be playing the roles and the positions that the head coach would want from them in the international team. So they're going to need to have discussions with the T20 franchises and say, okay, look, I know this is your player XYZ, this is what you want for
Yeah.
him. But for the betterment of the West Indies cricket team, we need these guys in these positions so they get used to playing these roles. So when they come and play for us, we know that they can slot straight in. And then you start looking for other young players, because there's not a whole raft of young players rushing through the gates at the moment in the CPL. Whether
No,
that is because they're not getting opportunities, or whether that is because there's not a lot of them, I don't know. But what I do know is that there needs to be, I guess, young players identified and given opportunities as well to play in the CPL, just as you had with the Breakout League, so that you can start developing them, exposing them to higher levels of pressurized cricket against the
yeah,
best T20 players in the world, with the guys, the overseas guys that come in and start mixing, rubbing shoulders, speaking with these guys, seeing
yeah.
how they practice, seeing how they train, and take away those learnings and implement that into the West Indies domestic ecostructure. Because you look at an IPL, that's clearly what has happened and is happening, and the benefits are there for everyone to see. And so that's what you need to replicate from a CPL standpoint.
Yeah, I'm just thinking now in terms of how you could go about it. You mentioned there, obviously speaking with the coaches in terms of determining, you know, for instance, let's take Jason Holden as an example. So he batted seven today, and then on Friday he batted
Out
10.
of 10.
Batted
Yeah,
10. There's no way on earth he would be batting seven or 10 or even nine. Say, for instance, say seven, eight, or nine in that for, I think he's playing for, he's moved from Barbados, hasn't he? So wherever he's going to, he wouldn't be playing in that role for that side, though, would he?
exactly. And so then you ask yourself, what's the benefit of him doing that for a franchise side,
Yeah.
but not getting the opportunity to do it for the West Indies side?
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately how you really pick cricket teams. Like, you look at
Yeah.
domestic first class, for example, you look at openers to come in and open the batting for the
Yeah.
West Indies. You
Yeah.
look at mid order players to go
Yeah.
and
To
bat
come in.
in the mid
Yeah.
order. You know, that's how it works. So if in the T20 format of the game, which is supposed to be our strongest format of the game, you've got 5, 6 guys that do one particular skill
Yeah.
all in your 11, then you're sort of handicapping yourself.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Like you said, in any other format, you bring in like for like, and you find you pick people, and you're bringing in your overseas players, you fit them in based on what you require at that time, I suppose. So yeah, I understand what you're getting at. The other point that you made in the message that you sent me earlier was about player development coaches and programs. What was your sort of thoughts on what do you mean by that as such?
Um, so as I said, in terms of preparatory camps for these guys before they come into series, I think that one thing that I must definitely commend the West Indies Cricket Board for at this point in time, you look around every West Indies team that could be playing cricket probably is playing
Is
cricket at the
yeah,
moment.
yeah,
Yeah, you've got an A-team series on,
yeah,
you've got an academy series on, you've got the senior men's and women's team playing cricket. So the only teams that probably aren't playing cricket are the under 19s. But it's the first time in my recollection that so much cricket is being played, which is obviously commendable,
yeah,
and you have to give credit to the board for executing on that. What I would like to see as well is we talk about stroke rotation, we talk about identifying roles and
yeah.
the skill sets required for operating in these roles. I think that there needs to be sort of I guess not preparation camp, but player development camps as well. So you look at the franchise system, for example. Not much is happening now because it's outside of the cricket season, which is way too short because think of the Caribbean having pretty much, I mean, obviously there's hurricane season, so you have bad weather
Yeah,
here, but for the most part, you have at least 300 days of sunshine.
yeah,
And cricket is played for probably 120 days of that.
yeah.
So you're not really maximizing or utilizing um, all of what's available to you. I know that the board is in massive credit at the moment in terms of finances.
All right, okay.
Not asking them to go and spend tens of millions of dollars, but
Yeah,
I do think that they need to identify a few skill development coaches, whether it be for, and this is how I would do it. I'd have the opening batters group together, middle order batters group together, wicket keepers group together, spinners group together, and fast bowlers group together. And I'd have how many ever coaches they want to identify for these individual roles, taking them through their paces as to, okay, let's say this week or this month, we're going to
yeah,
work on test match or 4-day batting, 4-day bowling, whatever the case is.
yeah,
This week or this month, we're going to work on test T20, 1-day red ball, I mean, white ball styled um, bowling, different skills for our spinners, our fast bowlers, whatever the case is, so that these guys can continue to practice in a more structured environment as opposed to just coming to franchise practice and you're just bowling for half an hour, you're bowling for an hour, whatever the case
yeah,
is. But there's no real purpose. This is just all skill based. So today we're working on wide Yorkers. This week it's
yeah,
just all wide Yorkers. Next week it's all slow balls, all varieties of slow
yeah.
balls. Let's see what you've got. Bouncers, standard length, and just
Oh, well
continue to
done. Yeah,
hone and develop these skills over time. Just as we talk about strike rotation, it's not something that's just going to be implemented. And a guy's not. If we could, as players, wake up tomorrow and say, "I'm going to rotate the strike," no one in cricket would really get out because then you could just be able to say, I'm not going to get out either. And you
yeah,
just don't get out. We,
yeah,
we wish that were the case. But, these skill development camps, you could have guys rotating the strike. Literally all day is spent on rotating the strike because the power game is natural to the West Indies. So it's just finding
yeah,
different ways of rotating the strike. Now, whether it is having guys, no matter where the ball is pitched, you have to chip down the wicket, hit it down the ground for one, whether it be long on, long off,
yeah, yeah,
chip it over mid wicket, that gap between long on and deep mid wicket, chip it
yeah,
over extra cover, that gap between the sweeper and long off,
yeah,
different things like that, and start working on these different skills. So
yeah.
after a few months, after a few years, it becomes secondary to them.
Well, that's what I think. The few years is the thing. You're working towards that next World Cup, so
Yeah.
you're using that. That's your that's your end game at this moment in time. And like you said, that's when you hone in those skills. I was thinking, when you were talking about the roles and different things, is there a way where I know we spoke about mentorship before, and the Cricket West Indies have obviously developed a little bit of some of the mentorship stuff into it. Is there a way where, and the IPL have done it very, very well, where they brought in these the coaches, and they have like it's brilliant the way they do it, and we can't talk enough about how well the IPL do it. But you look at the successes that the West Indies have had, and you look at the players who won the T20 trophies. Why can't this? I think they need to be getting involved in the CPL from that mentorship perspective.
I've been saying that for a long time, but it's not even just involved in the CPL. It's
No,
also
it's in
involved
yeah,
in West Indies cricket holistically. So you
yeah,
look at a regional franchise setup. You look at you can have a Chris Gill, for example, someone that is, in my opinion, the best T20 batsman ever. He can be involved in all facets of West Indies cricket because this is someone that also has two triple centuries in Test match cricket.
yeah,
Well, this is someone that also has 160 something Test match wickets as an off spinner.
yeah,
So this is someone that has 100 Test match
yeah.
catches. So this is a cricketer that you're bringing in, someone that can teach the young players how to think the game. So
No, that's it. That's it. Because you go through that list and you look at your Marlon Samuels, your Dwayne Browers, your Pollards. There's so much to go at.
and it's not just these guys alone. Obviously, you still have the guys coming all the way down from the Sir Garfield Sobers, who's still alive.
Yeah,
You've got Sir Vivian Richards and all the other players that would have been successful internationally, and the guys that would have been successful in
yeah,
domestic cricket for years and years. You get them involved and get them in and around the cricket because
yeah,
ultimately, the transfer of knowledge is the most important thing. You look at an Australian team, for example, there's always some former great player in and around the setup giving advice to the current players. And that's ultimately what you want, helping guys and getting guys to mature quicker, getting them to develop quicker, and getting them to understand how to operate on an international level and be successful.
yeah. I just want to make a funny point, to be fair. When I was speaking before about the game, and he was like, "I've got this game on. I've got the A team game on, and I've got the academy game." And I just had visions of you there with like these three screens, like your pen and pad, making all these notes down and things. But it is like I said. I know we're joking about it, but it's brilliant. Like you said, the volume of cricket that's being played at the minute is kudos to the board.
Yeah, it's been a long day. There's still two games ongoing at the moment. It's still pretty early in the Caribbean. I
Yeah.
think the A team and the academy is still going, but yeah, it's still got a lot more cricket to watch for the evening.
No, and it's actually the Leeward Island T20 finals today as well. So that's another more cricket being played, obviously, and in Leeward Islands.
Yeah, don't those are, don't get me started on that. I don't know why they're playing a T20 tournament when the Leeward Islands doesn't play T20 cricket. Obviously, the sponsor is cool and smooth, but I think it would have been more beneficial for them to play a 50 over tournament, knowing that that's the next format of cricket that the Leeward Islands are going to play. But we know that the president is an absolute genius, right? So
Yeah. So going into going into the third T20 on Tuesday, do you see? I still think the West Indies have still got a big chance of still winning a game here, and I don't want it to be a to get swept in both T20 and the 50 over. Do you see any personnel changes? I know we've mentioned that the last game we didn't know Akeal Hosein's visa situation, but do you see anybody else coming in just to change it up a little bit?
I think that you've got to test some guys on your bench to see, obviously what they have. Obviously, they may do that a bit more. Well, the squad does change a bit for the
Yeah,
Ireland
yeah,
series, but I guess you want to test them again. Some of these guys that are coming in that are on the bench right now against a quality opposition like England as well to see
yeah,
what they have and how they react to obviously bowling under a bit more pressure, batting under a bit more pressure. The likes of Adil Rashid, Josh Butler, etc. The T20 greats. So I guess that would be the biggest takeaway for me from the next game because it's not as if the West Indies lose this match that they're not going to the World Cup anyway.
no,
So the biggest thing for me right now is obviously the World Cup is next year, but in my mind, the West Indies should be building towards the 2029 World Cup because we pretty much know the players that we have here already. So let's start building towards
yeah,
that because
yeah, yeah,
I don't think that unless a miracle happens, we're not gonna win this one. So we can start exposing and developing some younger players as well for the rest of, I guess, the next few series that we have, because we already know what the senior players offer us. I already know pretty much unless something drastic happens, who we're taking to the World Cup anyway.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm looking ahead and starting preparation from now, so that guys are ready in what's that, a few years time.
Yeah. No. Well, I won't keep you any longer because you've got lots of cricket to keep watching anyway. But as I always keep wrapping up, the podcast. Please do keep commenting, and Karen will keep coming back to you with your questions and the answers. Do really appreciate the interaction side of things. But yeah, any questions, keep firing them in, and Karen will get back to you. But thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the Powerplay Podcast.
See you guys soon.